In 1986, DC Comics published Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual number 2. Contained within this comic was the 12-page short story Tygers, written by Alan Moore, drawn by Kevin O'Neill, colored by Anthony Tollin, and lettered by John Costanza. Tygers would go on to become one of the most infamous comic book stories of the 1980s. Here's Kevin O'Neill discussing the reasons why. The Tiger story was going to be part of the Green Lantern Corps backup series. It was about the temptation of Abin, the lantern who gave Hal Jordan his ring. It's a fantastic story with sinister whispers and half-truths and so on. I drew it, sent it in, and the editor of the book, Andy Helfer, rang me up and said, "There's a problem with your Green Lantern Corps artwork." I said, What am I going to have to change then? He said, "Well, there's a problem with the comics code." I asked them what could be changed, and they said, "There's nothing you can change. The style is unsuitable." He said we can't do it without a code sticker, and it was briefly spiked. I rang up Alan Moore and told him, and he was actually jealous. They published it in an annual sometime later without a code sticker. The code was on the wane by then. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Comics Rot Your Brain, the show where screenwriters talk about the comic books that we love, mostly from the 1980s. I'm one of your hosts, I'm Steven Bagatourian, and my usual terrific co-host, Chris Derrick, is not here with me today, so we're doing a little solo episode deal like we do from time to time, and I'm just going to be discussing a very short story here, only a dozen pages long, that still had a massive impact on comics and really has been remembered and has become an important, in fact, crucial part of the Green Lantern DC Universe canon. So this story is called Tygers, and it is a fascinating and weird and highly disturbing story where we find out all about Abin, the Green Lantern who was the one who gave Hal Jordan his ring. And this story is drawn by Kevin O'Neill, and I think him and Alan Moore make such a phenomenal team that it's hard to describe the synergy between them appropriately, but there is just so much great stuff going on between these two guys, and we've seen it across many collaborations, including the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and some other stuff they did together. And of course, Kevin O'Neill's career is legendary in British comics, and he drew everything from Nemesis the Warlock to Martial Law to the aforementioned, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with Alan. But Kevin O'Neill also was one of the founding art directors of 2000 AD, and along with Mike McMahon, he was really neck and neck with McMahon for being the most bizarre and innovative artist perhaps at 2000 AD in those early years. And he just had a seismic impact on the British comic book scene and as well as the American comic scene later on. So Kevin O'Neill sadly passed away recently, but he was a giant of comic books, and it's really wonderful to be able to talk about this short story drawn by him, and of course written by this fellow you may have heard a thing or two about named Alan Moore, who just so happens to be the greatest writer in the history of comic books by a very wide margin in my estimation. And really, Alan Moore is one of those people whose work really does, in fact, live up to the hype. And, it's kind of annoying when people get sort of deified in any sense as the greatest of all time and, shit like that. And some people may not agree that Alan Moore is the greatest writer in the history of comics, but I would say those people are sorely mistaken because, I feel like the work that Moore did just nobody measures up to what he did. So yeah, this is just a brief drop in the bucket for both these men, this 12-page story. But why don't we talk about it and find out why the Comics Code was so deeply offended that Kevin O'Neill became public enemy number 1 for the Comics Code Authority. All right, so let's get into the actual issue here. Okay, this is just such a freaking great short story. This comic book is a testament to how much you can do in just a brief amount of pages if you are a phenomenal storyteller. And Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, they make it look so easy here. This brings to mind some of the great classic short stories from EC Comics, where in 5 or 6 pages, master storytellers of an earlier generation, like Harvey Kurtzman or Johnny Craig or Bernie Krigstein, could tell a classic story in 5 or 6 pages. Well, you got 12 pages here with Tygers, but this is just such a haunting and memorable and exquisitely terrifying story that it just kind of takes your breath away. So let's talk about it a little bit. We open the story on page 1. We got a spaceship crash landing into a planet that looks an awful lot like Earth. And we've got the angular, sort of intricate artwork of Kevin O'Neill, which immediately announces itself as being unlike any other 80s comics artwork of the time over at DC Comics. The work here just looks bizarre. I mean, it still looks kind of like creepy and weird even today, but certainly by the standards of 1980s DC Comics, O'Neill's work stood apart, to say the least. So on this page, we see the spaceship crash landing in a huge panel on the first page of this story, and the beautifully written captions, of course, from Alan Moore start off with a little prologue. And the prologue begins by saying, "Years later, he died. Colliding with the radiation girdle of the turquoise planet, his ship suffered a critical malfunction. His ring of power was similarly useless. There was nothing he could do. He watched helplessly as the melanoma drive began to devour itself, and he knew then that he had been deceived. Had he relied upon the ring alone, perhaps he need not have perished. He fell, and all the way down in his mind, he could hear them laughing." Pretty fucking great first page here. And over that, we see Abin looking like he is just freaking out, sweating hard at the controls of his ship, which is crash landing onto Earth. And although he is wearing the ring of the intergalactic super cops known as the Green Lantern Corps, for some reason he's not flying himself around as the Green Lanterns have the power to do. He is instead inside of his ship, and it is a ship that is crashing. Now, one could ask oneself, why doesn't he get the fuck out of the ship right now and just fly away? But you know what? We wouldn't have a story then, and let's not think about that too much. So as his ship crash lands into Earth, we see some really grotesque, haunting demons in the background, as only Kevin O'Neill could draw them. And these demons look disgusting, and that is just a little foreshadowing for what we're about to see here. So on the next page, we jump back to many, many years earlier, and we see Abin Sur talking to his own power ring, which is kind of charmingly and weirdly represented by a circular green bubble that just has like some lips and a mouth with some teeth just talking to him. And instead of just like a weird green orb or some sort of, like symbolic representation of the ring's voice, it's just like a mouth with some teeth. And that's, I guess, a representation of the ring talking. So Abin Sur says, and he's looking at this planet from a distance here that's a particularly nasty looking weird planet, and he says to his ring, "Tell me again what you know of the sphere beneath us." And the ring says, "The orb is named Ysmalt." I got no idea how to pronounce that. I don't know if it's a silent Y. I apologize to all the Ysmaltians out there in outer space, but who knows? The orb is named Ysmalt, Abin Sur, a lifeless world, deigned forbidden territory by the guardians of Oa, whom you serve. Many millennia ago, it was the throne world of the dismal Empire of Tears. During the night eons when magic held prominence, the Empire of Tears spanned 3 galaxies. Its regents, deathless and malign essences, whose cruelties had grown too sophisticated for mortal form, they reigned unchallenged, until the elders of Oa declared themselves guardians of the universe, commencing with a purge of dark and necromantic factions from the starways. The Empire of Tears was no more. The demons were chained, but not dead. Though disembodied and physically powerless, their subtle and dangerous minds remain entombed upon Ysmalt. It is a corpse world haunted by its dead masters, and none may go there, save by the Guardian's leave. So that's page 2. And I got to say, this is an awfully articulate power ring. That was a very lovely series of statements and sort of storytelling from the ring here, explaining what this corpse world is all about. And all I can say about the images accompanying it is that they are kind of stomach churning. in a way where you almost don't blame the Comics Code for being really upset about this one. I mean, obviously fuck the Comics Code and, fuck the reasons for the Comics Code existing in the first place. See 1950s national hysteria regarding comic books, Frederick Wortham, EC Comics, etc., etc., a tale for another day. But I gotta say, if I was someone whose entire job was all about censoring comics, looking at the first couple pages of this, I would be a little bit unnerved. I'd be like, what are we doing here? Because we got some demons and some grotesqueries going on here that just look pretty gross, and in a way that just feels just haunting and disturbing and, Lovecraftian, I suppose. Yeah, definitely taking the Green Lantern story at this time in the 80s and giving it quite the horror makeover. So yeah, moving forward to page 3 now, as Abin Sur ventures down into this weird kind of Salvador Dali meets H.P. Lovecraft kind of a quote unquote corpse world. Abin Sur keeps talking to his ring, and he says, "The Guardians are parsecs hence, too far away to ask permission. Is this truly the world upon which the crippled ship that I detected has crashed? It is. Then I have no choice other than descent into the maelstrom. By that first and final hand, what is it that creates such an atmosphere?" And the ring answers, nitrogen, 61.39%, oxygen, 16.04%, neon, 12.26%, methane, 9.57%. And we're looking at just what looks like rivers of blood and just highly disturbing assortments of like bones and like ruins and just all kinds of just crazy decomposed stuff that does look very much like a literal representation of this idea of a dead world filled with demons or demonic entities. Abin Sur goes on to say, "I do not speak of this world's mantle of gases." Yeah, that's right, Ring. Stop being so fucking literal, Power Ring. "But rather, I speak of its bitter and poisonous landscape, its silence made of suggestive whispers, too soft to hear." Gotta say, Abin Sur and his ring both pretty poetic. Poetic. If this whole, international space or intergalactic space cop thing hadn't worked out, Abin Sur could have maybe been a writer, Gotta say, that's some pretty nice language there. So he goes on, he says, yeah, it's bitter. I'm speaking rather of its bitter and poisonous landscape, its silence made of suggestive whispers too soft to hear. And suddenly we hear a green lantern after so long. Abin Sur, he's called Abin Sur. A green lantern here, just think. So all these voices are screaming, and Abin Sur uses his ring to put on a bit of a light show, bit of a spectacle, and he screams, "Show yourselves!" And suddenly we see one hideous, monstrous demon in front of him, and maybe a couple of demons. They say, "We stand unconcealed, Abin Sur, as we have stood since your Owen Masters entombed us in these forms ages ago. But do not suppose we bear a grudge, Abin Sur. We wish only to help." That last line is coming from like a pool of bubbling blood, and then a decapitated, crushed, disgusting head with 3 mouths on the floor has the next line. And looking up at Abin Sur with its like smashed in, rotted head, this decomposing creature with his head, whatever it is, looks like some kind of demon. It goes on and says, "Why, that's right, Abin Sur. You have only to ask. Is there some woman you desire, or perhaps the power to overthrow your blue-skinned masters who despise you and undervalue your abilities? Begone, illusions. You have nothing that I desire." Abin Sur just flies up into the sky and like breaks apart all these demons with his power ring, some kind of a power blast. And the demons, as he blasts them into bits, and the bits rain back down all around him like little, just like clumps of like toxic hail, demon hail. He says, "You have nothing that I desire." And they say, "Haven't we? Haven't we? Haven't we? Haven't we? Haven't we?" It's kind of maybe overwhelming for Abin Sur. He's got all these little demons just kind of whispering at him, taunting him. And for some reason, he's used his power ring to create an octopus, it appears. And the octopus is, frankly, I'm not sure what the octopus is doing. Just kind of hanging out in the sky above Abin Sur. I don't know. I mean, my answer to most sort of, things like this that are a little bit inscrutable is usually, it's comics. So that's cool. Looks cool. Space octopus. Yeah, why not? And so green power ring octopus. On the next page, we see just a super grotesque giant hourglass that looks like a giant hourglass for a giant demon. And within it is a twisted, mangled, decomposing body upside down, with its head being sort of like fried in some acid, perhaps. And that creature says, "Let me out, and I'll tell you a secret concerning your father, 8 years dead." And then some other hideous demon says, "Care to witness 12 unspeakable tableaux? Simply release me, and..." And then another demon chimes in, "Don't listen, he lies, all lies, save for me." And then Abin Sur looks like he's getting pissed, with his angry, big, red fuchsia head. He's like, "Is this the legendary Empire of Tears? You repulse me." And then suddenly we hear another voice. "And quite rightly, they are banal demons, and believe all to be as stupid as themselves. They insult your intellect." "And who would you be, flatterer?" "I do not flatter. I merely speak that which is true. I am Kul of the 5 inversions." "And what do you offer?" "Answers. Any 3 answers to any 3 conundrums." An intriguing proposition, but you would lie, of course." You run that risk, certainly, but as my answers are freely given, it is a small one." "Yes, that, at least, is true." "Okay, very well. My first question: where is the vessel that lately crashed here to be located?" All right, so Abin Sur is being kind of crafty here, thinks he can probably play this demon, make a little deal with this demon, and see if the demon will help him find the ship he's looking for. This is probably a lesson for everyone at home listening. Do not try to make deals with demons. Never, never, never a good idea. Even if it seems like it at the time, no, not a good idea. So Abin Sur is asking, first question, where's the vessel that crashed here to be located? And this particular demon, Cole, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the demon's name. It's Qull. If I had actually read Jeff Johns' Green Lantern years later, I would know this, probably because I know this story had a massive impact on the Green Lantern canon and went on to directly inspire the much beloved Sinestro Corps War and also Blackest Night. And I read very little of those 2 storylines, so I don't really, I'm not familiar with the appropriate pronunciation, but I'm assuming it's Cole. Yeah. Anyways, he answers the question. He says, "A league to the west." That's where you can find the spaceship, Abin Sur. "There's one survivor, a child. What are your other 2 questions?" And Abin Sur starts to fly away, and he says, "I think that will wait, at least until I've evacuated, or I'm sorry, no, at least until I've evaluated the veracity of your first answer." So then he goes and finds this ruined, sort of beat up spacecraft that seems like it's been split down the middle, and it's a beautiful panel drawn by Kevin O'Neill with Abin Sur coming upon this beleaguered spacecraft, and inside there is indeed a living alien child that frankly looks a little bit like a baby Abin Sur, like it's a little red, big-headed alien kid. And here he brings the child back to Cole, which I don't know if you should really be bringing the baby around the demon, but okay, maybe Abin Sur is not like a adoptive father of the year here. Cole, the demon, says the child has a broken ankle, but is otherwise unharmed by her passage through our world, whereas you, Abin Sur, you still have 2 more questions. Well, Abin Sur? The child whose rescue brought you to Yamalt is safe, just as I said in answer to your first interrogative. I await your second query. It would seem logical to suspect malicious intent. Your kind despises my masters, the Guardians, for entombing you here. Yet, as you say, your answers cost nothing. I'm free to ignore them. So, very well. I wish to know of the direct peril that the future holds for me, simply told and without embellishment. No. This is such a mistake, Abin Sur. Good Lord. Again, don't ask a demon to tell you how you're going to die. This is just just on the face of it, this doesn't even pass the smell test of being a good idea. I don't know how this guy got to be a Green Lantern, because I would think you're supposed to have a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of intergalactic street smarts. Like, don't go to a corpse world and ask a demon how you're gonna die. He's gonna fuck you over. Good lord. Anyways, it's a story and a damn good one, but man. So he says, I want to know the direct peril the future holds for me, simply told and without embellishment. And here we got a ginormous panel of Cole looking absolutely just disgusting. And the way Kevin O'Neill draws, like the sinewy, just disgusting, vile, gross looking creature here. He's got like a giant toothy mouth coming out of his long neck, and he's got horns and mouths and teeth in all the wrong places. I mean, it is just he's a sight to behold here. And so he goes on. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, but this demon of Cole, the whole time he's talking, is literally crucified. And I don't know how I skipped that when he was introduced earlier, but he's a giant sort of just hideous alien creature who's crucified on a pole, and he is crucified with a giant, huge, what looks like a it looks like, I guess, a sword almost of some kind with a Green Lantern emblem on the front of it. And it's clear he's been crucified and left here by the Lanterns and the Guardians. So anyway, so he's speaking here while still crucified with all these like Green Lantern nails. I guess they're nails more than swords. They're giant, oversized Green Lantern nails that have crucified him to the cross. Again, highly disturbing. I guess it's not a cross; it's more of a post. But his arms are up in a vaguely Christ-like position here. So the whole thing is very, very disturbing. He goes on to say, well, I fear I must embellish somewhat, Abin Sur. You would not be best pleased with the simple answer. The simple answer is death. Your death will come when the ring of power that you wear eventually fails you, running out of energy at a critical moment, perhaps while you are unprotected. This the copy I'm reading, it looks like the text is hard to read here. I think it says unprotected in a hard vacuum or engaging an enemy. However, let it cheer you to know that your passing will not be without its compensations. Upon your demise, a new Green Lantern will be appointed to your space sector. Throughout the Green Lantern Corps, he shall be hailed as greatest among his contemporaries. Wherever he goes, legends shall spring up in his footsteps, your own achievements being utterly eclipsed. Does that bother you? Bother me? What an amusing notion. Of course it doesn't bother me, even in the unlikely eventuality that you speak the truth. Yeah, right, Abin Sur. But it is I who should ask the questions. What is the most terrible catastrophe that the Green Lantern Corps in which I serve has yet to face? Oh boy. So Cull goes on to say here, and I think this is a big part of what inspires the later Jeff Johns stories, if I understand correctly how that all worked. Cull goes on to say, you speak of the final catastrophe. After untold millennia, the enemies of the Green Lantern Corps will rise, united against them. The Corps shall be destroyed to the last life form. The planet Oa shall be as dust. Amongst the gathered foemen shall be numbered the weaponry of Quard. I'm sorry, what is that? Hold on, let me reread that. Among the gathered foemen shall be numbered the weaponers of Quard. Ranks the sentient city and the unspeakable children of the White Lobe. The Empire of Tears, finally released from entombment, shall join the assault. Sodom Yat, a Daxamite, hailed as the ultimate Green Lantern, will perish, battling the Lobe spawn. The planet form Green Lantern named Mogo will be last to fall, as Ranks explodes a blink bomb within his core. And after that, there will only be the demons dancing in the ruins of Oa to the rhythm of drums bound with taut blue skin. Whoo! Holy shit, that is good. That is really good. Taut blue skin, for those of you who don't know, is what those little guys who run the Guardians of the universe, the Guardians who are in charge of the Green Lantern Corps, these little powerful fellows with blue skin, and these demons are going to turn them into drums. Whew, that is not a good future to hear about. Why are you asking these questions, Abin Sur? Whew. So we come back to Abin Sur himself, and he says, "You are well named, Kol of the five inversions. You invert the truth relentlessly. This terrible apocalypse is the fruit of a sick mind with fantasies of revenge." If you say so, Abin Sur. In any event, you have made the 3 enquiries permitted to you. You may leave Ysmalt and forget all that I have said. Be assured, demon, that is my precise intention. Farewell to you and to this dismal world that is your dungeon. I leave you to your imaginings. And so then Abin Sur launches back into the sky, and he's got the little red alien baby with him, and he uses his power ring to create a really cute little mini baby carriage and some toys. Even, like, I appreciate that he went to the trouble of creating toys for this little alien baby as he's in the middle of being taunted by this horrific demon. Abin Sur still thinks to use his power ring to conjure up multiple toys for the child he's just rescued from this space crash. So, okay, Abin Sur, maybe not the sharpest tool in the Guardian's tool shed in terms of, his sort of his keeping his wits about him amongst these demons, but at least he's nice to babies. So he flies off with the baby, and the crucified demon Kol is left with his demonic buddies. And after a silent panel, we see one of the demons asking, "Well, brother Kol, have you destroyed him?" And Kol answers, or Quol, or however you say that, "It was no great challenge. The intellectual ones are always the easiest to entangle. But yes, dear sister Roxum, I have destroyed him, though it will be a decade before he knows it." And now we see all the demons erupting into raucous laughter here. And the final caption says, "And the immortal demons of Ysmalt found their own laughter so distracting a novelty that they did not cease for 19 weeks. That's a lot of demon laughing. We now cut to a page of Abin Sur, again, chit-chatting with his ring. Seems like he's got a good relationship with his chatty ring here, and he looks troubled. He looks like he's thinking. He's literally just kind of rubbing his chin, thinking. And it says, Abin Sur's ruminations upon the matter endured far longer. So tell me, again, talking to his ring, that's just like this little green mouth floating next to him. So tell me, is there a chance that you might run out of energies at some vital instant, irrespective of whether Kol lied? A remote chance, but yes, it is possible. Well, then I can see no harm in observing precautions. Perhaps on longer missions I should travel by starship, conserving your energies. I have no objection to this proposal. Good. Then I may put the Empire of Tears and their morbid speculations entirely from my mind. Incidentally, is it not time that I recharged you? You must be low on power. You recharged me but an hour ago, Abin Sur. Did I? Oh. And I think this is intended to convey to us exactly how paranoid Abin Sur has now become over his own prophecy of his that he has heard now, the prophecy from the demon, rather, regarding the impending death of Abin Sur. He's so paranoid now. He's just constantly wanting to keep his ring charged, keep his ring safe at all costs, and it's caused him to shift his normal operating protocol that he's had with his ring for God knows how long. So now we return to the same moment with our prologue, with that ship crashing out of the sky toward Earth, only now our prologue has become an epilogue. And fascinatingly, it's a lot of the same language. And now we see a different angle on the ship hurtling down toward Earth. Abin Sur, again, looking so intense, so much urgency on his face. as he knows full well what's about to happen here. And the captions say, "Years later, he died. The yellow radiation girdle about the turquoise planet rendered both starship and ring of power useless within instants. He fell. If only he'd relied upon the ring alone, he might perhaps have tested the radiation before plunging through it. If only." The ship's gestalt complex shrieked once, went hopelessly insane, and then melted. He tried to recall what his successor would look like. He fell, and all the way down in his mind, he could hear them laughing. And we see just such a hideously gross, awful panel of these giant, monstrous demons just looking absolutely enormous, looming over the planet Earth like these giant mega entities. And they look, in their demonic, vile way, they look pleased, they look happy. And I gotta say, just looking over these pages, reading the story once again, I do feel kind of icked out. Just looking at the art. The Comics Code may have had a point. Kevin O'Neill draws beautifully and exquisitely, but boy, is it some disturbing and kind of scary, gross, horrific artwork at the same time. Can something be beautiful and horrific? Yeah, sure it can. Take a look at some of these panels. The crazy thing about the story is it's a footnote in the careers of Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. This story would be easily one of the greatest comics done by anyone else who was involved in it. For 99% of creators, this story would be an absolute highlight of their career in comics. For both Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, it's an intriguing footnote. But obviously, these guys were both stone cold legends who would go on to create so much just extraordinary work. For Alan Moore, for Kevin O'Neill, I highly recommend everybody check out their bodies of work. It goes without saying, but it's fascinating to see a style of art that, in its very essence, has a disturbing feel to it. And it's not easy to completely put your finger on it, but there is something here that gets under your skin in a very mythic sort of almost impossible to fully explain kind of way. But the more you stare at these images, it's not comforting. And I know this is nothing compared to some of Kevin O'Neill's masterworks like Nemesis the Warlock, particularly Volume 3. From what I hear, Nemesis is actually very high on my list of comics that I want us to read and cover on the show at some point. So we'll definitely be returning to Kevin O'Neill. But in this episode, I just wanted to give everyone a little discussion of this story, Tygers, that you may have missed. I'm surprised not to hear more people talking about this story. There's just so many great short stories that Alan Moore wrote for DC Comics, and it's just one of the reasons that Alan Moore is the greatest comics writer of all time, is that he never phoned it in. He never, ever phoned it in. Or if he did, it was on such rare exceptions, such incredibly exceptional, like tiny moments where maybe arguably he wasn't operating at his full capacity. But by and large, I mean, no one's got a batting average as high as Alan Moore, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to comic book writers. And this is just one more example of just a weirdly great story that really stays with you, and it's quite haunting. And Kevin O'Neill kills it on the artwork, and I gotta say, Anthony Tollin does a terrific job of coloring it. He was one of DC's big colorists in the 80s, and he comes through with some really appropriately queasy hues. I gotta say, if you look at some of the color choices here, it's like a sickly green, it's a sickly purple, it's like a sickly gray. It's like the whole thing just looks kind of gross, and it's right on point for what the story is. And also the legendary John Costanza turning in just an ace, world-class job of lettering. And I'm assuming he's responsible for the logo for the actual story, Tygers itself, which is written in a phenomenally unique and really broken, jagged font. And even the font, I mean, I shouldn't say font. I mean, it's obviously designed by hand, but the choice for the letter forms and all of it just looks weird and disturbing in a way that's just perfect, totally in line with the story itself. And I believe the fact that Tygers is spelled with a Y is some kind of an allusion to William Blake, the sort of the English poet slash mysticist, etc. People know about William Blake if they're into such things. But there is William Blake had a poem called The Tiger, spelled with a Y. That was a short poem that explored the darker side of creation and God. The tiger symbolizes primal power. And so there's something going on there. There's an illusion there that I'm sure I'm not fully grasping. But as always with Alan Moore, his stories are just full of allusions to millions of things, literary things, all kinds of Easter eggs that you could look into. The William Blake poem, The Tiger, starts off, Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Oh, and fearful symmetry, that was also something else. What was that? That was also a famous story. Oh, what was fearful symmetry? Okay, sorry, it's going to bug me now. Was it the X-Files? No, was it a comic? How am I not remembering this? What is fearful? Yeah, Watchmen, of course. It was Watchmen's fearful symmetry. The whole chapter's design here. Okay, now I'm looking this up. All right, sorry, we can cut this out. Yeah, of course, Watchmen. All right. Well, anyways, yeah, I'm just looking at the end of this Blake poem here. I'm just curious what else it says. Tiger, tiger. The end of the poem, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Yeah, so Alan Moore, just always with the illusions. You could teach a college class on most of his stories, and you'd have a lot to talk about. At the very end, there was something else he said here that I thought was kind of a cool thing. Oh yeah, the ships. when he says the ship's gestalt complex shrieked once, went hopelessly insane, and then melted. Gestalt is clearly an allusion to something that is not part of how you power a spaceship, but it's the study of how humans perceive and organize visual information, emphasizing the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I'm used to that word being used in an artistic context, like the gestalt of a piece of art. But here, Alan is applying it to something to do with the ship and what's powering it. I mean, just it's wordplay on top of wordplay always. And it seems like Kevin O'Neill is a perfect partner for Alan Moore, much like Eddie Campbell and Dave Gibbons and, other artists that have just frightfully detailed Easter egg laden work. I think Alan does really well with these sort of OCD artists who are, hyper attuned to like jam packing panels with lots and lots of information. And I mean, you could look at every panel in the short story and just find so much information. Like I'm pretty sure on the last panel on page 9, when you see the demons literally playing the drums made with the aforementioned skin of the guardians, one of those demons that's kind of dancing about there looks an awful lot like Nemesis the Warlock, the character that Kevin famously co-created with Pat Mills. And so that's a little Nemesis the Warlock Easter egg. And yeah, I'm sure I'm missing stuff in here, but it's only 12 pages, but there's so much to look at here. Such great stuff. So, all right, folks, that's a little taste of why Alan Moore is the all-time GOAT of comic book writing, and Kevin O'Neill, I will admit, was not necessarily to my taste as an artist that much through a lot of his career, but I will say that I'm developing more and more of an appreciation for when I see some of his stuff from certain peak periods, whether it's Nemesis or Martial Law even. And I did read Martial Law back in the day, but it also kind of scared me. But some of that work does appeal to me more and more when I look at it these days, and it's certainly unique. I've always really had a fondness for Mike McMahon, the other kind of weirdo artist at 2000 AD during that period. And I adore Mike McMahon's work, but more and more I am developing a Kevin O'Neill appreciation, and I can't front on this story, Tygers. This is a home run as far as the short story goes, and it obviously freaked out the Comics Code and got DC Comics to ultimately publish this story in a comic book without the Comics Code, which was a first, perhaps, at least in that generation for a superhero comic. That wasn't something they did often. So a legendary story here, and certainly something worth revisiting. Again, it's in the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual number 2, so you can seek that out there. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us on another episode of Comics Rot Your Brain. If you love 80s comics, particularly the more obscure, kind of off the beaten path 80s comics, whether they be from indie publishers or from our friends at Marvel and DC. There's just so much great stuff in comics in the 80s, and we love to cover it here on the show. And if you're a fan, and if you're still listening at this point, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button, because if nothing else, that really helps keep the show going. And if you're so inclined, we got a Patreon. You know how those work. You can look it up, Comics Rot Your Brain. We got some free stuff on there. I don't know, why do I always call it free? It's not free. You can pay, but it's only a couple bucks a month. All right, folks, that's it. I'm getting loopy. Time to go. Thank you all for listening. Wishing you guys the best. Go Comics. See you next time. Bye.